It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast, to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 45, I want to remind you guys of a few things. I want you guys to please like and subscribe. The Detroit Pistons podcast, Revved Up 906, is continuing to grow, but you guys need to help out with us and keep pushing up the subscriber mark and the likes. We appreciate you guys. Also, shout out Grind Clothing Co. They are our official merch sponsor. You can find bucket hats like the one I have. You can find stickers. You can find hats, sweatshirts, zip-up hoodies. I believe there's maybe a tank top in there. There's polos. There's all kinds of stuff. So make sure to click the link in our YouTube bio and below this video. You can click that link. It'll shoot you right to grindclothingco.com, and you can represent your favorite Detroit Pistons podcast. Also, one other shout out Campfire Coworks, because that is where our studio is located here in downtown Marquette, Michigan. And Campfire Coworks can help you grow your small business, and they are also an office sharing space. So if you're located here in Marquette County, make sure to come on down to Campfire and get to know local business owners and people that are in the business community. Campfire Coworks is a great resource for the Upper Peninsula, so we are appreciative to be able to partner up with them. Without further ado, let's get into episode number 45. This week, there's been some pretty big news in the Detroit Pistons community. Of course, with the popularity of podcasts going up and up and up, we see past, current players getting interviewed each and every week. And guys like Rasheed Wallace have been very prominent in the podcast community for the Pistons. But we saw former Piston Andre Drummond pretty outspoken on a podcast recently, and he said he is the best rebounder of all time, and he has a case to be a Hall of Famer. This is an interesting take, and Andre, I understand why he's doing it. He wants to kind of be confident in himself, but also we need to get into the details and get into the statistics behind his big claim, and that's what we're going to do today. And then we'll wrap up the episode by letting you guys know if we agree with him, if he should be a Hall of Famer, if he should be known as the best rebounder of all time. We'll get into it. But something I want to talk about is his totals. We saw him so far in his career have a total of 9,963 rebounds. I would like to think he's going to hopefully reach that 10,000 mark. I can almost guarantee that. But we see people that top the list of rebounding throughout their careers. We see guys like Wilt Chamberlain at the top of that list with 23,924. That's a crap ton of rebounds. Let's get into it. Does that list matter of the career totals? I mean, Wilt Chamberlain had a long career. Andre Drummond probably won't have that long of a career. Where does that factor in?
Well, I think, okay, when you look at this, and the stat there of how he has 23,924 compared to Andre Drummond's 9,963, that is a big difference.
Yep.
But career games, it's not that far off. Wilt Chamberlain played 1,045 career games. Andre Drummond has played in 785 career games, meaning I'm not saying he's going to hit that mark anytime soon because that's an impossible mark, but he's still going to be one of the better rebounders in NBA history, given the fact of how many games he's played. And truly, when it comes down to it, yeah, like you look at Kareem, I love Kareem, but when you play in pretty much 1,500 games in your career, and you only hit 17,000 rebounds, while you have Bill Russell ahead of you who plays fewer games, 963, not even 1,000 games in his career, and yet still has 21,620.
Yeah.
Honestly, longevity doesn't really matter in this discussion. It's more of like, when it's all said and done, career games should be in this conversation. It's not really necessarily how many years did you play. If you played a long time, you should have a lot of rebounds. Not everybody can do that. And there's just only a select few guys in NBA history who are good at what they do. And if one of them is rebounding, they're at the top of the list. Because you have guys like LeBron, who's even on this list. He is ahead of Andre Drummond currently. He's sitting at 32 out of where Andre Drummond is at on the list at 43 out of NBA history, and LeBron's sitting at 10,667. Now he's played a lot more games than Andre Drummond's played in. And honestly, he's played a lot more games than Wilt Chamberlain has played in, and Bill Russell, and almost Kareem. But yet he isn't at that mark. So truly, great players have great numbers, but if you are great in one field, you're going to be at the top of the list.
Yeah, because we don't see Andre Drummond, playing a bunch of games. We don't see him in even probably the top 100 or even the top 500 in all-time scoring. So it's all about that quality of minutes with the rebounding. And a guy like Andre Drummond, we see him as far as current players, not many guys ahead of him right now. You mentioned LeBron James. DeAndre Jordan is one of the current guys that are above him, and he probably doesn't have that many years ahead of him. I would like to think that Andre Drummond will probably catch LeBron. LeBron maybe got 3 years left in him. I'd be surprised if it went farther than 5 years. But guys like DeAndre Jordan, he'll catch him. So he's definitely in this new generation. There's a case to be made in the last 10 years. He's one of the best rebounders that we've seen.
Yeah, when you break down, because I broke it down as far as, well, how great is he in terms of rebounding the ball? What is his totals compared to past players? What is his totals, like average-wise, compared to past players? So I broke it down by draft class. Obviously, Andre Drummond was in the 2012 NBA draft class. So he's pretty young into his career still. So the fact that he's at 9,963 rebounds in 785 career played games, that's not bad, given the fact that he's still very young into his career. He's probably at the midway point, maybe, but he can still go a long ways. And when you break it down, because I broke it down per year, so I went all the way back to 1997, and since 1997, he is 10th all-time in rebounds in that mark since 1997. So obviously, one, you'd have Tim Duncan, who's sitting at 15,091, and then Andre Drummond at 9,963. He beats out a ton of guys in their draft classes. And you go as far as rankings for averages, Andre Drummond's number one. He's averaging 12.7 rebounds in his career, whereas Dwight Howard is next up at 11.8, and he's played more games. So realistically, when you think about the numbers and everything, longevity really doesn't matter in this. It's more of like what you do in the time you've played. And the fact that Andre Drummond has played in 785 career games, which is much fewer than pretty much anybody out there right now, and he's at the numbers he's at, yeah, he has greatness to his game.
Something I wanted to point out is one of Andre Drummond's best rebounding years was in 2018. That was the year Blake Griffin got introduced. That is not the year Blake Griffin got introduced. That would have been the team with Tobias Harris, Marcus Morris. We would have saw Reggie Jackson at the point guard position. And in 2018, his campaign, he had the 5th best single season rebounding percentage of all time, grabbing 26.23% of the rebounds during a game on average. I mean, that's just incredible. If we could get Jalen Duren to do that, I mean, he would be right up there with Andre Drummond. For me, when I see Andre Drummond and I see his efficiency of grabbing rebounds each and every game with the Detroit Pistons for so many, nearly like 8 years with the Detroit Pistons, he was a double-double machine. He never missed that mark. He was so consistent. You know, we see guys like Mark Bryant coaching a lot of young centers. Monty Williams brought him into the organization to work with guys like Jalen Duren, James Wiseman, Marvin Bagley, Isaiah Stewart. Andre Drummond is the kind of guy that I think has a future career as far as coaching young big men. And I think that's a testament to his quality of play for so many years and knowing how to just outwork fellow big men in the NBA, guys like Steven Adams or Rudy Gobert. I mean, we're not really talking much about Rudy Gobert, and a lot of people consider him a great rebounder and a great big man in the paint. I think that's a testament to how great Andre Drummond was with the Pistons.
Yeah, and I will say this. Andre Drummond, Rudy Gobert doesn't get enough credit for what he's been able to do, but Andre Drummond does. He's kind of like the player that is in the wrong generation. Yeah. That's what he's a part of right now. If Andre Drummond was in the 80s, 90s, he'd be considered one of the greats. But given the fact of this generation, we're more of offensively spoken than getting just rebounds. Like everybody's paying attention to who drops 30 every night, who drops 20 every night, who has a double-double, who has a triple-double, not necessarily who has the most rebounds. When you look at Dennis Rodman was known for getting a rebound here and there. That's what he was known for. He wasn't known for his offense. He was known for his defense and rebounding. So there's different kinds of guys that have come through and come and gone. But Andre Drummond is in the ballpark of the Dennis Rodman-esque player in the sense that he's defense and rebounding. He's not known for his offense, but Rudy Gobert has more of an offensive capability to him than Andre Drummond has had. That's why you have Rudy Gobert coming up in more discussions and whatnot in the sense of all-around player. Andre Drummond is not an all-around player. He's a defensive and rebounding type player.
Yeah, it's something I want to reference for all you listeners and watchers, that Andre Drummond right now is currently ranked 43rd with the most all-time rebounds through his career so far. So top 50. We see guys like Kevin Love is the closest behind him, and at 54. So the point of where the rankings are right now for all-time rebounds, he's in conversations of so many big names. To have a guy that played for Detroit for so long and to be referred to and put in conversations with all these great big men, for us, I think that shows the impact Andre Drummond had on the Pistons.
Yeah, I went down and looked through our history even. How many rebounds has he had compared to other Pistons players? And there's certain categories. My goodness, I have a lot of notes. Okay, so in a Pistons uniform per game, he averaged 13.9 rebounds. He was number one on the list out of 5. But if you look in terms of career rebounds on that same list, 8,199. That is second behind Bill Laimbeer. So he isn't the greatest rebounder in Pistons history. He may have the most highest average, but that's also because of the type of player he is in the sense of he was a double-double machine when he was with the Pistons. He got a lot of playing time. He wasn't one of those guys that just came in and did rebounding. Dennis Rodman should be higher on that list, but he didn't play as long with the Pistons as Andre Drummond did.
Right.
So obviously he would be higher on that list. But in terms of NBA history outside of the Pistons, Andre Drummond sits at 4, whereas Dennis Rodman is number 1. Dennis Rodman number 1 with 11,954 compared to Andre Drummond's 9,963. So it shows you that as a Piston, Andre Drummond was better than guys like Dennis Rodman, etc. But career total, Andre Drummond he's not as good as the others.
Yeah, this is, I love comparing past and present. I mean, Andre's not a present player currently playing. I love comparing the old time Pistons to like the guys of this generation. And I'd love to get more perspective because we're 22 years old, he's 21, we're young. So it's hard to know the impact of Andre Drummond on this generation's team to the bad boys, because you wish you got to totally experience what it was like in the Detroit, Michigan community, watching guys like Rick Mahorn and Bill Laimbeer just dominate in the paint, because we experienced Drummond. We saw him run up and down the court, school guys a lot of the nights, double-double machine. We saw how dominant he was in the paint. It's cool to know that we got to experience that. Unfortunately, it wasn't always on a winning team, but it's cool because we've had a lot of great centers in the Pistons organization, and a lot of us younger guys got to experience Andre Drummond.
Yeah, and just breaking down what Drummond has been able to do in his career compared to other players, one thing that I want to point out here is total rebound percentage, meaning estimated percentage of available rebounds grabbed by the player while the player is on the court.
Yep.
Meaning this is has as high as you can go. Andre Drummond is number one in NBA history for the amount of rebounds he grabbed while on the floor with 24%. That's pretty darn high. The next up, Dennis Rodman at 23%. You don't have guys like Moses Malone at 9 with 19%. Wilt Chamberlain is not even in the top 30, but you have guys like Tim Duncan at 22 with 18%. And I want to throw this out, offensive rebound percentage. So offensively, I personally think offense, in terms of that capacity of rebounding, is the most important. That guarantees you who's good and who's bad. Because if you can get a defensive rebound, yeah, so can Chris Paul. Realistically, any guard out there can get a defensive rebound. It's just more of like, is the rest of the team running up the floor or not? Who grabs the board? It doesn't matter. Offensively, you have to win that battle. You have to box your guy out. Not only that, but then you have a swarm of the opponent swarming the board and swarming the glass to get a board, to get the rebound. And Andre Drummond sits second in offensive rebound percentage at 16%, right behind Dennis Rodman at 17%. And so when you look at what he's been able to do offensive rebound-wise, he has 6,572 rebounds offensively. That is darn near good. I mean, he's 35th on that list all time, but the fact that he's that high and has that amount of rebounds offensively speaks to how high quality of a player he is and rebounding.
Yeah, his best case in his argument for being one of the best all-time rebounders, he claims he is the best. It's hard to kind of back that, but when you show stats about his percentage of rebounds grabbed compared to other players during a game, it's incredible, because it's like, if you could get one, that's like untouchable. Like the 26% in 2018, to be able to do that, I don't know if that's, I mean, maybe a Victor Wembanyama can do that again, but it's one of those stats that you look at and you're like, is that repeatable by a player in today's NBA when there's guys that are so athletically gifted, they're so long, constantly boxing out. We're seeing a lot of big men in the center position not be shaped like Victor Wembanyama. We see guys like Steven Adams, Jaren Jackson Jr., Joel Embiid, guys like Andre Drummond. These are big-bodied big men that, how can you be that dominant when most of the NBA centers are big like that? I think the only guy that comes to mind is like a guy like Victor Wembanyama that can possibly repeat that.
And honestly, I don't think even he can.
Yeah, it's a stretch.
You have to be a certain build. Majority of these guys on this list are big men, of course, but then they all have similar builds, honestly. Like, the only exception is like a Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman was a freak of an athlete, who's super long and tall, whereas Andre Drummond does have the length to him. He does have a lot of height, but he's a bigger build compared to Dennis. And majority of these guys on that list, old school wise, have very similar builds. And so, like a Victor Wembanyama, no offense, but I don't think you're hitting that mark just because of the type of player you are. You're very long, which you should be able to get a rebound in that capacity, but it's not necessarily his bread and butter. That's not what he's known for. He's known for being an offensive juggernaut. And guys like Kevin Durant, there's a reason why these guys aren't that high on the list, is because they don't have the body weight to basically fight you in the paint to get a board. And so I don't think there's going to be another guy in more current history that is going to hit to the level of an Andre Drummond, what he's been able to do. The only way that happens is if there's another shift into the type of like league we are, because we're offensively right now. If we're gonna have a player go through like Andre Drummond has done right now, or guys like Dennis Rodman and others have done, there needs to be more of a defensive-minded league. and I don't see that happening anytime soon.
And it's funny because, every year there's a guy like Victor Wembanyama that's like the big name in town, right? And they come into the draft, they go top 10 in the lottery, and then you just kind of wait and see what happens with them. Guys like LaMelo Ball will blow up and actually have a good career, yet to be seen with Victor. But there's not really many guys on the scene right now that are these big-time centers. There's like the guy from Purdue, I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Zach Edey.
Zach Edey. I mean, there's guys like him, but even him, he's not like a big guy on the scene right now. So it'll be interesting to see like the next man up, if there's going to be another big-bodied big man that comes in that can maybe challenge something like this. But there is a case for like a Jalen Duren to be able to make that big of an impact. I wouldn't put it against him. But I was looking at Andre Drummond's current stats, because right now we know that he's kind of hopping from team to team, and ever since he's left the Detroit Pistons. And last season he was with the Chicago Bulls. He played 67 games. And the point I want to make is he played nearly 13 minutes a game, but really 12.7 minutes a game. And we saw him average 6 points. Okay, that's going to happen when you play 12 minutes a game. But averaged nearly 7 rebounds in 12 minutes. I mean, it's just proving that even now in his early 30s, proving that he's going to be efficient and make an impact with the rebounding category. And right now, I believe he's still with the Chicago Bulls.
Yep, he is.
I'm not sure how long his contract is, but that's going to make him a hot commodity for many years to come, just with the rebounding efficiency, even with him getting up there in the age column.
The only way he continues to soar up the charts is if he stays healthy.
Right.
That's realistically what it comes down to. And he's been probably by far one of the most healthy big men of all time, in the sense that even with us, he didn't really get injured all that much. And so if he continues to stay healthy, realistically, sitting at 43 right now, he in the next 2-3 years, he could definitely be in the 40-35 range in the next 3 years, given the fact of how many rebounds he's averaging per game.
Right.
Like the fact that he's averaged 12.5 rebounds a game his entire career, and he's just continuing to build upon that. Granted, old age messes with the knees, so he's not going to have a lot of hops. I mean, he never really had a lot of hops anyways, but the old age determines how many boards you get. And there's a reason why even Wilt, as great as he was, only played 1,045 games. Or Bill Russell at 963, or like even Bill Laimbeer at 1,068. Obviously, I think Andre Drummond can hit those numbers of games total, but it comes down to if he's healthy or not.
I'm looking at his stats and averages over his whole career, and back in 2019, 2020 with the Detroit Pistons, arguably his best year with the Pistons as far as averages, 18 points a game, and then 16 rebounds a game. That is just incredible. If Jalen Duren could offer that, I mean, applause. And the fact that we traded him the next year, the year we traded him, he was averaging nearly 18 points and then 11 rebounds. So a little bit of a dippage there, but still, I mean, Andre Drummond, I feel like if we weren't such a bad team a lot of those years, he would be in a lot higher regard at this point in his career. It's a shame to see a guy that made such a big impact on an organization kind of fall back and get traded away between teams. But to that point, I think it also shows the commodity of teams needing these big-time rebounders. He makes a big impact on each team he's played with.
Yeah, there's not a lot of guys on teams anymore that can rebound. Majority of the time, it's just anybody at this point. And so to really have a good big going out there and hitting the glass and getting boards for you, that is something that is very valuable. There's a reason why you have like Mike Scott or others make an NBA roster still. It's not because they can drop 30 on you any given night. It's because they work their tail off. They do what other players don't do. There's not a lot of players going out there to, oh yeah, let's just go get rebounds. No, everybody wants to score at this point. Like, no disrespect to guys like Joel Embiid who hit the glass. They do, but they would rather score. majority of the big men out there right now would rather score than hit the glass. And it's like, dude, you're 7 foot. You can easily out-rebound almost anybody here. Why aren't you hitting the glass?
Yeah.
And so when you have a guy like Andre Drummond who would rather hit the glass than score, even that, in the same regard, Jalen Duren is in that ballpark. He would rather box someone out and get the rebound than look to catch and shoot. There's just certain guys that are built different, and Andre Drummond's built different, Jalen Duren's built different, Dennis Rodman was built different. All these guys have been built different, but that's because of either the generation they grew up in or what type of player they are, and that's really going to determine who hits the top of the list going forward.
Question that I want to break down. Last year, 2021-22 season with the Brooklyn Nets, we saw Andre Drummond only play 24 games. That's another reason why it's like hard to make the case that like he's made the biggest impact on rebounding. But we saw that year him average 22 minutes a game and then get 12 points a game and then 10 rebounds in those 22 minutes. If Andre Drummond wasn't dealing with injuries throughout these last like 6 years, do you think you see him topping that list a little bit higher, or in his case of being the best rebounder of all time, that much more significant?
I think without those injuries, he'd be sitting at probably like 30 out of the infinity number of players in NBA history.
Right.
I mean, he's sitting at 43 right now, 9,963. At 30, Bill Bridges with 11,054 in 926 games played. Let's say obviously game-wise, Drummond would hit that with those games he's missed in that span. But then also, I think he would hit that number. I think he would potentially be as high as 28 on this list currently if he were to play. And it really comes down to longevity in terms of health, not in terms of sitting at year 20 out of playing every single game of your career. Obviously, that's a great thing. But one of those key things is like some guys that are great, but then just continue to play. Like there's just some of those, there's a couple players here and there that do that. So like there's, as I mentioned earlier, Mike Scott. Mike Scott, he could have retired probably 6 years ago, realistically. He could have retired, but he hasn't. He's one of those guys that keeps playing. Kyle O'Quinn keeps playing. But those are the type of players that still add to their total. But it's not like they're averaging a crap ton of rebounds. So they're just slowly going to keep going up. And that's what Andre Drummond needs to do, is not necessarily retire early, but if he wants to keep getting that total up, he needs to be one of those guys that just stays in and plays for the rest of his career.
Before we wrap up today's episode, are there any other statistics you want to break down a little bit, maybe to show why Andre Drummond isn't the best rebounder of all time, or to make a case that he is top 10, top 5, whatever it is? Any other statistics?
Honestly, there's nothing that I could say right now that would prove that he is the greatest.
Right.
Because I'll just say he isn't the greatest. There's a lot of guys ahead of him there's a lot of guys ahead of him on the current list of totals and averages that are better than him. But that's just because that was what they were known for. That was their staple. Wilt Chamberlain grabbed like 50 rebounds at one point. Bill Russell, rest in peace, one of the greatest players to ever live. Like, there's a reason why you can't ever say that Andre Drummond is a better rebounder than those two guys, even Kareem. Yeah. And honestly, you can't even say he's a better rebounder than Dennis Rodman, because that's a very bold take.
I was going to say that.
That's what Dennis did, was just rebound and defense. You can't say you're better than him in that, because you're able to do a lot more offensively than what Dennis could ever do. And the fact that you're sitting 43rd right now out of your career, granted, you haven't played as many minutes or as many games, but the fact that you're 43rd, yeah, that's good, but you're not as great as the others. And personally, my Mount Rushmore, I would go Wilt Chamberlain number 1, Bill Russell number 2, and then I honestly would not have Kareem number 3. I would have Nate Thurmond, and then Uncle Wes Unseld. That's my top 4 Mount Rushmore. And the reason why Nate Thurmond and Wes Unseld are in that category and whatnot is because of the fact that the amount of games they played where their numbers are. So you look at Wes Unseld, ranked 13th all-time in career rebounds. He has played 984 games, and he's sitting at 13,769 rebounds. Nate Thurmond is sitting at 11, 964 games played. He has 14,464 rebounds. The fact that you're able to do that in such a small span, you can't top that. So Andre Drummond, you are not the greatest rebounder of all time.
Yeah, I think Dennis Rodman is one of the top guys, is a good case just because his size isn't there. Like, it's all about the effort for him. I mean, we're talking about a guy that, you might want to fact check me while I'm talking about this, what Dennis Rodman's height is. But I think being like a 6'8", 6'9", I believe, height-wise, and banging bodies with all these 7-footers is just insane to me. So
6'7".
6'7". I mean, that's even crazier. I mean, we're talking, that's how tall Cade Cunningham is. And you imagine a guy Cade Cunningham's size grabbing the amount of rebounds he did with putting in that effort. I think the skill level there with Dennis Rodman had to provide to put up the numbers he did in the rebounding category is just terrific. I think a guy that's 6'7" doing what he did, that's just great. So I guess to wrap up today's episode, we can't completely agree with Andre Drummond. There are stats showing that, of course, he's top 50 all time in rebounding. That's for sure. Top 25, possibly. Number 1, Andre, I'm sorry, but it's just a hot take. And I understand he's probably trying to go after clicks, trying to run up his Instagram followers, get those endorsement deals. But in the end, it's just kind of a hot take on his part. I like the confidence, but in the end, it's just, when you look at the stats, you know, he's just not top of the list. I would say, for me, just because I'm biased, I'd maybe put him top 15, just because he's a Piston. I'm going to always support him. But in the end, number 1, Hall of Famer. Sorry, Drummond, just don't think it's happening. That will do it for episode number 45. Thank you guys for watching, listening, and subscribing. Make sure to hit that like button. Also, make sure to comment below. We would love to know what you guys think about whether you think Andre Drummond is the best rebounder in NBA history. We would love to know your thoughts on that. We will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.